Urban Affairs will come to order. Clerk will call the roll.
Chair Lozano.
Here.
Vice Chair Gates.
Here.
Bernal. Cortez. Cunningham.
Here.
Gonzalez. Hayes. Remetto.
Here.
Tepper.
Here.
Okay, members, thank you for being here. Quorum is present. We're going to get right to it. So the chair lays out House Bill 1579 and recognizes Chairman Canales to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chair. Presently, most municipal firefighters in Texas have few rights by law regarding the investigative procedures for alleged misconduct. These dedicated first responders are being forced into accepting punishments based on unfounded allegations, coercive techniques, and investigations that are not formal in nature. In some instances, they're even required to use leave to attend scheduled interrogations, and many firefighters under investigation are coerced into accepting suspensions in lieu of termination or to complete a never-ending investigation. These are common sense rights that are already practiced by many cities and should have no fiscal impact. 1579 seeks to resolve the issues by giving simple protections that exist for certain firefighters under Section 143.312 of the Local Government Code, and it makes it apply to all firefighters. Any further questions? I'd ask for the privilege to close.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, any questions? No. Okay, Chairman, we'll reserve your right to close. Members, we have one witness registered. Chair calls Clay Daughtery. Thank you for being here, sir. We have you registered as Clay Daughtery with the Fort Worth Firefighter Association and yourself registered for the bill.
Yes, that's correct. Good morning, Chairman Lozano and members of the committee. My name is Clay Daugherty. I'm a member of the Fort Worth Firefighters Association. I'm here today to speak on House Bill 1579 and voice our support of the bill. This bill provides the basic investigatory rights that all Texas firefighters should be entitled to. We believe that the rights provided by HB 1579 are fair and just. I think that we can all agree that a firefighter should never be threatened by an investigator with punitive action during an interrogation. That is not the point of an interrogation. Interrogation should be used as a fact-finding session and not as an opportunity to scare a firefighter into taking a punishment. Furthermore, it makes sense that the person that is assigned to conduct an investigation should not be the complainant, should not be the ultimate decision maker regarding disciplinary action, and should not have any personal involvement in the case. What is also important is this bill has no fiscal impact to local or state governments. It also stands that the bill could prevent future litigation by standardizing the rules of administrative investigations. This bill will only impact municipal firefighters and will not supersede any contracted provisions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against House Bill 1579? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Chairman Canales.
I'll leave you with this. These are the folks that run into the burning building, and we shouldn't run out of this building until we fix this.
Okay.
Close.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, with that, the chair will withdraw House Bill 1579 and leave it pending at this time. Chair lays out House Bill 4842 and recognizes Chairman Holland to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm not quite as chipper as Chairman Canales is this morning, but House Bill 4842. Thank you for the opportunity to lay this out. Cities and law enforcement agencies appoint civilian oversight boards to assist in overseeing investigations of police officers and firefighters and building community trust. 4842 seeks to ensure that officers and firefighters across jurisdictions are afforded the same levels of due process by providing guidelines for civilian oversight board operations. Specifically, the bill limits which entities may investigate a police officer or firefighter and makes certain that their personal records are confidential during investigations. This will ensure these records are not made public when allegations are unsubstantiated and unfounded. The bill also prohibits certain criminals from serving on these boards in order to keep them free from bias. With that, I reserve my right to close.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? No questions, Chairman. Thank you. We'll reserve your right to close. Just to remind the witnesses, if we could, we're going to have a 3-minute timer. I'm sure you'd be under that, but just if it goes off, just finish up your statement as soon as you could, just for the sake of time. We have 13 registered on this bill, and we do gavel in for session at 10, and we do have 2 more bills after this one. So we could stick to the 3-minute timer. That would really help. The chair calls Thomas Downing. for being here, Mr. Downing. We show you registered as Thomas Downing with Racial Justice Ministry University, United Methodist Church, and yourself against House Bill 4842.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Tom Downing, a retired United Methodist pastor who admires and respects the men and women of all police departments who daily put their lives on the line to keep our cities safe. However, all of us in service professions share a special ability to harm those we are called to protect. Though my pastoral misconduct cannot maim or kill, it can, through betrayal of trust and exploitation of the vulnerable, destroy lives almost as effectively as any weapon. We service professionals also like to think that we can discipline ourselves. After all, we're on the side of the angels. But self-discipline can fail. The signs begin with rumors, then open claims of harm, lack of trust, and loss of cooperation from vulnerable communities. Next come multi-million-dollar lawsuits and criminal charges for the offenders. I've seen this progression in my own profession. We see it now in the Austin Police Department. This does not mean the system is riddled with misconduct, but it does mean that current self-discipline procedures are not effective. In Austin, the Office of Police Oversight was created in the police contract of 2018. In December of 2021, an arbitrator stripped the office of its access to information based on limitations in the police contract. For this reason, dozens of local community groups began to press for the Office of Police Oversight to be recreated as it was intended. I myself sat in on union contract negotiations and watched the police union push back on every attempt the city made to restore the Office of Police Oversight's powers. Finally, over the summer, these community groups placed a measure on the May 6th ballot that would create an independent Office of Police Oversight. As it appears this measure will pass, the Austin Police Association and others are now attempting through this bill to get what they want regardless of what the voters wish. I urge the committee to vote against 4842, which would effectively hamper independent civilian police oversight, not just in Austin, but across the state of Texas. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Any questions? No questions. Sorry. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Chair calls John Trahan. Thank you for being here, John. We show you registered as John Trahan on behalf of yourself against House Bill 4842.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And I want to echo Mr. Downing there as someone also in a service profession. This summer, in a few weeks, I'm going to start, sorry, I've been didn't quite prepare something as eloquent as him. But in a few weeks at the start of the summer, as someone who's been a lifeguard in the city of Austin and Greater Texas for the past 8 or so years, I'm going to be training the next slate of lifeguards working in summer camps and other institutions around the state. And we're in a profession where sometimes, no matter how well we do our jobs, people drown. And God forbid that ever happen on my watch, on the watch of someone who I'm going to be training this summer. I would want their parents, the public, to have access to as much information as they need to know how that happened. And I absolutely want us to be held accountable as a team. And I can't imagine telling or talking to parents and saying, it's a hindrance to my job if you have access to the evidence of what happened to a child here. Yeah, and that's mostly what I want to say, is that I still can't believe we're back up here just 3 weeks ago after having to say the same thing to the Senate, and that there are families here who have lost their loved ones and had to use Ring doorbell footage to know what happened to their loved ones because the police lied. And we're making them, or y'all are making them come back and have to tell their story again, and that's ridiculous. Sorry, I don't have much more eloquent to say. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions?
Oh, yeah.
No questions. Thank you, sir.
Of course.
The chair calls Thomas Villarreal. Thank you for being here, Mr. Villarreal. We show you registered as Thomas Villarreal with the Austin Police Association and yourself registered for House Bill 4842.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Detective Thomas Villarreal. I'm the president of the Austin Police Association. the labor organization that represents the 1,484 officers that are left at the Austin Police Department. I'm here today to speak in favor of HB 4842, a bill that seeks to bolster the rights of working class men and women who take an oath to serve their communities in 102 towns and cities across Texas as police officers. HB 4842 is a very much needed change to Local Government Code 143, a code which was created to, quote, secure efficient fire and police departments composed of capable personnel who are free from political influence and who have permanent employment tenure as public servants. It is in this language, which comes from Local Government Code 143.001, where people like myself, officers who have taken positions of leadership within our organizations, find our purpose. My drive to work on behalf of the Austin police officers comes from a knowledge of the political arena that we find ourselves working in, an arena that has become more and more politicized each year that I've been on the job. Finding ways to allow for and to protect due rights for hardworking street cops that I represent is what drives me each and every day. Part of these due rights process deal with a very clear set of working condition issues that deal with internal administration investigations of officers. Who can investigate officers when they're accused of violating departmental rules? What all can be asked of the accused officer? When can officers be interrogated? Where can they be interrogated? And how officers are treated while under investigation. It is my opinion that these basic due process rights are strengthened with HB 4842, while a municipality's ability to discipline and fire bad officers is maintained. In fact, when done correctly, a municipality can stand behind a case to fire an officer while maintaining that officer's due process rights, sets the municipality up for long-term success by ensuring that they do not have cases overturned on appeal. HB 4842, in defining what civilian oversight is and outlining what civilian oversight, outlining that civilian oversight may not be an investigative body in an internal investigation, allows for the original intent of the legislature that officers will be investigative officers to continue, even as some municipalities move towards more meaningful civilian oversight through meet and confer contracts. In Austin, we have negotiated over civilian oversight for over 20 years. There's a whole generation of Austin police officers who've never worked without oversight. But it's important that as anti-police, self-admitted police abolitionists strive to take over all aspects of police policymaking, this legislative body reaffirm its commitment to the very men and women who keep citizens of Texas safe. We are not asking for a free pass. We are simply asking for due process rights to be respected. I ask you to pass this bill out of committee, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, members. Any questions? No questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Chair calls Brian Crow. Thank you for being here, Brian. We show you registered as Brian Crow on behalf of yourself against House Bill 4842.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Hi, everybody. Excuse me. We humans, we're pattern recognition machines. We're incredibly good at it. It's our greatest natural strength. It's what makes us fast learners. It's what's led us to our domination at the top of the food chain, despite our relative physical weakness to other animals and other creatures on Earth. As children, even getting burnt by a hot kettle just once, we know to be cautious about the heat the kettles can give off. And we can see, a sport we've never played before and immediately recognize it as a sport. But this is also our greatest weakness. It's what makes us naturally recognize patterns that don't apply to a whole based on just one or two anecdotal experiences. We often don't even recognize when we do these ourselves. It can cause someone who has a bad experience with people who look a certain way to start to think unconsciously, a lot of people who look that way might be the same. It's what causes distrust with the police force. Somebody who has a bad experience with an officer might start to look at all police officer and sort of think the same thing, right? But it works both ways. So my issue, I think, with this bill is less about mistrust of the police overseeing themselves because of, their own malintent or anything like that. It's more about the natural unconscious biases we develop when our job puts us in a situation where we're dealing with people who break the law all day, every day. We're inevitably going to develop these biases against them and biases for the people that we know who are working the way that we do and doing the jobs that we do, right? It's exactly what's behind the whole thin blue line thing, right? They know that the rest of us don't understand how hard their job is. They know that the rest of us don't see how important that barrier is, And so there's that strength, that feeling, that knowledge about this, and it's a good thing in many ways. But it's a bad thing when your job is now to investigate, other people who have the same job as you.
In these instances, you need to be able to have people who don't have that experience, who don't have that, that perspective to come in and share it with the group and be a part of that so that we can catch the unconscious kind of developments in these investigations. I grew up with Raj Munasinghe, who was killed by a police officer who didn't, you know, through his training, whatever it may be, he shot him. He said, drop the gun, and before he'd finished the word gun, he had started firing on Austin, or I'm sorry, on Rajan. And you know, Rajan was trying to protect his own home. There was an intruder in there. The police didn't even go in and look in there. They shot him. They just barely glanced in the door, and then they kind of stood around and handcuffed him while he died. Sorry, this one time. But the point being, I think we all have unconscious biases. Even if we have good intent, it's not always enough. We need to be able to have more oversight. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Okay. Chair calls Craig Nazor. Thank you for being here, Craig. We show you register as Craig Nazor with the Lone Star chapter of Sierra Club and yourself against House Bill 4842.
Yes, that's correct. My name is Craig Nazor, and I'm the Conservation Chair of the Lone Star chapter of the Sierra Club. And the Sierra Club is against this bill, and I'm against this bill. I have lived in Austin for a while. When I first moved here, I lived with no air conditioning, and I went down to Barton Springs a lot, and they're going to develop an area that may have polluted the springs. And so I said, well, I'll go to the meeting. There were thousands of people there. 900 people signed up to speak. The meeting went all night. There was chanting. The walls of City Hall were shaking. And I'm sure there were police there, but I don't remember them. People had their say. That was Austin. That's why I live in Austin to this day. What a great city where you can do that, where democracy can work like that, and the springs are still clean. Well, now move ahead to the present day. And I agree with the APA representative. Things have become very polarized and very politicized. How do you stop that? I don't think you stop that by saying you no longer have oversight of the police. I've had loaded guns pulled on me once in my life here in Austin. I'm a musician. After a gig, 2 Austin police officers with loaded guns came up to me, and a situation that was a loaded gun was not required. Absolutely not required. And we paid $20 million last year for police abuse, settle those cases, and we'll probably pay over $20 million this year for that. Can you let Austin settle this the way a great city like Austin can settle its problems? Would you please allow us to do that? We want to vote. Let us vote. We will vote. That will happen. And then let us solve the problem. Austin will. Look around you. This is a beautiful city. We're glad to have you here. We're glad to host the Capitol. It's growing more beautiful, but we have problems. We do have problems, like the entire country has problems. But we have maybe a different view, a different way of settling these problems in some other cities. So please allow us to settle it the way Austin settles it. We might learn something and pass it on to the rest of Texas. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you. The chair calls on Alfredo del Barrio. Mr. del Barrio, we show you register as Alfredo del Barrio on behalf of yourself against House Bill 4842.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, for your time. So my name is Alfredo del Barrio. I've been an Austin resident for 10 years. I've worked in the tech and venture capital industry since then. Since I was 18 years old, I founded my first software company. We work directly with the police from that aspect, and I have a wholehearted respect for what they do and what they do to protect our community and our city. But I'm speaking also on behalf of my deceased best friend, Raj Munasinghe. You know, against HB 821, and not as an abolitionist, but as a call for change. As a tech CEO, multiple times over, and the venture capitalist that I continue to look for methods to change systems that make them better and just and more efficient. And at best, that's what we should be doing here. We should find some common ground. I'd like to finish with a Bible verse, if you'll allow me, that truly encompasses my best friend and who he was as a person. But beyond that, his death by the hands by the APD deserves an independent investigation. And I stress the need for oversight. We're just very heartbroken by a loss, and no family and friends should have a burial of their own son at 33 years old, one that was a member of the community bringing true value. And there have been things said by the police and things said in the media that simply aren't true or can be misconstrued. And that's what we're trying to fight here. I think independent oversight is the only way that we find that truth. And I think that's the only way that we make this equatable. I hated carrying my friend's casket, and no one should ever have to do that. I think our goal as a team and as a family is for this to be a learning lesson for both community members, citizens, and police, and build the trust the city needs. I'm not here to accuse the brave men and women, and I'm not doing so or their job, and I'm not here to combat them. But the non-interior oversight keeps things honest without an internal bias, which is inherent as us, as community members and human beings alike. And I would just like to see that only foster a better environment for the community as a whole. And I'll continue with that Bible verse that I think encompasses the true character of my friend who ended up riddled with bullets at his front door. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. And I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. And I am sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. And then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did I see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty when I give you something to drink? When did we see a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick in prison and not go visit you? And the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did, at least one of these brothers and sisters are mine, you did for me. And that's what I'm asking you to do here. And take in mind your constituents and make sure that there is independent oversight. That way something like this can never happen again, and we don't have to spend our time here. Thank you, Mr. Lozano.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions? No question. Thank you, sir. Chair calls Kathy Goodwin. Ms. Goodwin, we show you registered as Kathy Goodwin on behalf of yourself against House Bill 4842.
That is correct. Thank you for allowing me to testify. It seems to me that each city in Texas should decide how they will deal with issues of police misconduct by whatever means that city determines is best for them, whether it be Austin or Uvalde or any other city in Texas. Austin has chosen to vote on May 6th about whether to use a civilian oversight commission to investigate police misconduct. In Austin, millions of dollars have been spent to settle lawsuits brought because of police misconduct, and untold pain of people who have been injured by police misconduct. I'm speaking here right now mostly of misconduct, not the murder or killing of innocent people. Millions of dollars have been, if proposed, House Bill 4842, if it becomes law, it will keep individuals, cities around Texas from finding the best solution for them. This sort of one size fits all. And I believe that government is best served locally in this case because each city is very different and each city has its own set of problems of police misconduct, and to try to apply a state law to all of them does not seem like the best solution here. And please stop this unnecessary attack on the role of civilians in government. They have a very strong role to play. And I hope that you will vote against this proposed bill. And I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? No questions. Chair calls Mark Moonsing. Thank you for being here, Mark. We show you register as Mark Moonsing on behalf of yourself against House Bill 4842.
That's correct. Yes, sir. Thank you. Distinguished council, I'm here to lend my opposition to this proposed bill, which will remove public oversight from police investigations. Our family has had firsthand experience dealing with this conflict between transparency, truthfulness, and damage control when mistakes are made. My brother Rajan was at his home on his front porch defending himself from an intruder when the officers arrived on scene without lights, without sirens, and a single officer opened fire from 25 yards away. Rajan had no chance, and he had no warning. To make matters worse, several hours after his death, the chief of police held a press conference and purposefully provided a narrative, a false narrative of a white person being shot, and excluded the fact he was a homeowner. This comment gave us false hope, and for 2 days, we still believed my brother was alive. We were not told of the race or who that person was for 2 days. Additionally, in that conference, we were told that aid was immediately provided to my brother. We now know that he was handcuffed on his own front porch after being shot in the wrist with a shattered wrist. And despite pleas from officers on the scene to remove the handcuffs to give him aid, those handcuffs were never taken off of him. I thank God that my brother had a Ring camera. Otherwise, we might have never known what really happened that evening. In matters of police conduct, open civilian oversight is needed. It is needed to protect the integrity of the investigations. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? No question. Thank you, sir. Chair calls Ruth Moonsing. Thank you for being here, Ruth. We show you registered as Ruth Moonsing on behalf of yourself against 4842.
That's right. Good morning, members. I appreciate the opportunity to testify against House Bill 4842. I'm Ruth Munasinghe, a Sri Lankan, an American, and a Christian, as was my son, Rajan. On November 15th, Rajan, a tech entrepreneur, was killed by the Austin police while defending his home from an intruder. A security guard who Rajan had spoken to earlier that evening called 911 and reported the homeowner had a gun and was afraid there was an intruder in his house. Police arrived without sirens, lights, did not identify themselves, took a hidden position from 25 yards away, and began firing before finishing the command to drop your gun. They continued firing even after he complied with his hands up. Rajan never threatened the officers. He didn't even know that they were there. So without civilian oversight, the police investigation has focused on blaming Rajan and not the officers whose conduct resulted in the loss of my son's life. You see, they are still holding on to his cell phone. Why are they keeping that? They wanted to destroy it. And there's valuable photographs in there that I can never get back. Okay, the police version changed once they were made aware of the Ring camera evidence, which contradicted the story they were telling. This investigation is biased towards exonerating the officers rather than bringing about justice for Rajan. In order to have a fair and just investigation, I strongly believe civilians need to be involved in the process. So we've had to hire our own PR team, do our own autopsy, and private investigators to follow this story. Not every family can afford to do this, and it's not right. As a praying mother, I have done what I know to do best. I did my Joshua walk around this Capitol for 7 days and prayed for God to give you the wisdom and courage to pass just laws that protect the lives of all Texans. Thank you for your time. God bless you.
Thank you, ma'am. Representative Romero.
Thank you, ma'am, for being here and your family. And I'm sorry for the loss of your son. Can you tell me how long the official investigation of APD took before?
It's still going on.
And can you tell me the time, you said November 15th of what?
November 15. We met with the DA about 3 weeks ago, and I believe he told us it's still not complete. APD hasn't completed their investigation, but I think as they do their findings, they upload it so the DA gets that information immediately, but it's not complete.
And you've been relying on the DA to share information with you, or have you not been able to get information from the DA?
Well, he's getting all the information, so he can't make any commitments. But we have, like, they didn't even speak to the neighbors. And when the day Rajan was shot, there's a restaurant called Maddie's behind. That week, there was a homeless person there, and they had issues with that. There was someone in his backyard. He was in California with me for 2 weeks, and he flew back that morning. And he said, I'm coming back home on Thursday. He was very scared that someone was in his house. And he's such a gentle giant. He never meant to shoot anyone. And you could hear on the ring, he was telling that person, go away, I'm not going to call the cops. He was flicking his lights. It's just so many mistakes were done. And then there's a cover-up. Actually, it was really hard for us, family, because we are Sri Lankan community. They all thought that, my God, what has Rajan? We're a well-known family. And what has this boy done? Has he gone crazy? And the video clips that they showed made it look like that. But we hired our own private PR team. We did, because it was so wrong. And even one of the news channels that put out his story, I confronted them later and I said, why did you put that story out? Didn't you watch the video? And you know what? The guy told me, well, the police give us this stuff and we put it out. So we had to combat that, and that's not right.
So do you have, was there any APD liaison, someone that you can talk to within the department outside of the DA?
At the beginning, my son there was a detective in charge. And actually what was conveyed was, it was called a gun other, meaning it was not a high priority call. That's what we heard. But no, we haven't heard from APD. It's all, they don't say anything. And the sad part is for his funeral, we wanted those photographs. Rajan was the one who took photographs in our family. He was the goofy one. He took photographs of everything we did. We had no access to it. Then we heard from our lawyer that they said they will give us his cell phone if we give them the code so that they could copy it. But why should we give that? It's his business phone. He's a businessman. They don't need it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Members, any more questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Chair calls Kathy Mitchell. Thank you for being here, Kathy. We have you registered as Kathy Mitchell on behalf of Equity Action, and yourself registered against House Bill 4842.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I'm here today. I want to clarify some things that have been said. This bill would impact civilian oversight systems around the state because their primary purpose in many jurisdictions is to provide an independent and civilian eye on the process from beginning to end, and that requires full and unfettered access to information about the incidents that are coming in the door. And there are a couple of different key places where civilians play an important role that is all about having that access to information, which is what this bill is about. It's taking away that information access. I won't say the most important, an important role is that the civilian oversight system receives complaints from people and looks at the documentation to determine whether that should move forward and get an investigation. A key thing to know is that most complaints against officers are not investigated at all. And so on this sheet that I've handed out is some data related to the Office of Police Oversight when it was fully functional and prior to losing its, quote, investigative powers, meaning its access to information. It filtered out the vast majority of complaints and spoke back to the person to say this either isn't verifiable or it doesn't violate policy. Something happened, you may not be happy about it, but it's going to be done now. And the important part about that is that if people hear that from the police department, they are less inclined to believe it. But when they hear it from the Civilian Oversight Office, who is the representative of us in this process, it's a better conversation. Meanwhile, the Civilian Oversight Office develops that credibility with people because when an incident needs investigating, they go to bat for that investigation. So they will recommend that this or that particular case be investigated fully and then monitor that investigation throughout the process. This is the piece about building trust that is kind of the functional heart of it. You start to believe that if someone tells you this is not a policy violation, there is not going to be any discipline in this case, you believe them because you know that when there's a problem, these people are going to bat for the public. So the concern that we have about the bill is the limitation on the role of civilian oversight. If it's not doing what I just described, it's not clear to us what it would be doing. And in particular, I do want to follow up. The model in Fort Worth is exactly what I have just described, and the statute in Fort Worth would be specifically undermined by this bill. They would have their powers strictly limited.
Okay, great. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you, ma'am. Chair calls Chris Harris. Thank you for being here, Chris. We show you register as Chris Harris with Equity Action and on behalf of yourself as well against House Bill 4842.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you today. I just really want to briefly reiterate the comments from my colleague, Kathy Mitchell. You've heard a lot about Austin and you've heard a lot about incidents in Austin, and I think those are important, and obviously folks are here to speak on those, I think, telling incidents. And this bill is much bigger than what's going on in Austin now or what will be voted on. Obviously, myself with Equity Action, I would really like this ballot measure not to be preempted. But this is beyond that. The Complaint and Administrative Review Board in San Antonio, the Office of Police Oversight Monitor in Fort Worth that Kathy mentioned, the Community Police Oversight Board, and the Office of Community Oversight in Dallas, Independent Police Oversight Board in Houston. All of these entities rely on access to information, and not just, and at some point during the actual investigation process in order to ensure that the investigation is being undertaken with fidelity. And this bill strips them of that access. That says only police can access that information during the course of the investigation. It also would, for those review boards that come after the fact, it's not clear what sort of investigation they can actually conduct, even though, again, these are recommendation bodies. These are not bodies with discipline. This bill is not about due process. This is about entities that give oversight to a process, make sure it's undertaken with fidelity, and subsequently make recommendations. Not that have the authority to make disciplinary decisions or anything like that. So this is a really, really big bill that would have a really, really negative impact across the entire state, and we urge you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? No question. Thank you, sir. Chair calls William Taylor. Thank you for being here, Mr. Taylor. We show you registered as William Taylor on behalf of yourself against House Bill 4842.
That's correct. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm here today speaking against House Bill 4842. I'm a Texan, a business owner, a homeowner, and a parent. My comments today are about kind of the emotional side of this that I haven't heard except in the terrible stories that my fellow witnesses are telling. And when I hear their stories and others like it, my heart breaks. There are too many cases like theirs, and one, even if there was just one, it would be too many. To be sure, our police officers are people. They're fallible. They make mistakes. But also, like other people like us, they should be held accountable. They should have to answer for their actions and learn. And people should be given an opportunity to hold them accountable in a way that is viable and real. We can honor their work and insist that they do better, that their actions not end lives, that their actions not cause irrevocable harm. I hear too many of these stories and I don't go looking for them. And my heart breaks. And how much more heartbreak must the people, the victims' families, their victims' friends, how much must they suffer? It's time for it to stop. Today, you don't even have to act to stop the violence. All you have to do is get out of the way of the voters who would like to make a decision. So today I urge you to vote against House Bill 4842. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Members, any questions? No question. Thank you. Chair calls Dorothy Doolittle. Thank you for being here, Ms. Doolittle. We show you registered as Dorothy Doolittle with Advocates for Social Justice Reform and yourself against House Bill 4842.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by acknowledging the courageous officers who risk their lives daily, worsened by the increased proliferation of guns. We support, that's ASJR, support the highest paid and best trained police department. We also support an independent oversight committee that ensures transparency and accountability. We are opposed to the provisions in HB 4842 that does not allow for anonymous complaints. Let me share this true story of a cadet who graduated as an honor cadet, yet was forced out of the department because complaints she made of questionable conduct of proactive policing. When fellow officers heard of this, she received no backup while on patrol, leaving the young officer in danger. We must ensure that all our officers are protected. Being able to make anonymous complaints is just one way. We all want safe communities for our residents and our officers. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Doolittle. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, members, we have one more witness registered to testify. Chair calls Bill Spellman. Mr. Spellman, we have registered as Bill Spellman on behalf of yourself against House Bill 4842.
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
My name is Bill Spellman. For 30 years, I was a professor at the LBJ School of Public Affairs. I retired 2 years ago. While a professor, I spent 7 years running the Regional Community Policing Institute, where I was responsible for training 14,000 police officers in the practice of community policing. And before coming to Texas for 7 years, I worked for the Police Executive Research Forum, a national association of big city police chiefs, where I spent my time working with police officers every day to find more efficient and effective ways of catching crooks and preventing crime. I've been working with cops since the 1970s, and I haven't tried to do the math because it'll just make me feel old. I'm speaking against this bill because I think it's going to be bad for the police. It's going to be bad for public safety. You've heard some arguments already about accountability. Having a civilian oversight commission being able to conduct its own investigation and to oversee the investigation conducted by Internal Affairs will improve those investigations, improve the amount of information available to the police chief. And I think that's true, and that's a good argument. It will also probably save the city some money. Austin spent $20 million in payments to plaintiffs last year. We're expected to spend more than $20 million this year. One reason why we're spending so much money on plaintiffs and lawsuits is because the Internal Affairs investigation is skewed towards suggesting that the police officers involved in a particular case did everything right, that there's no need for discipline, there's no need to pay particular attention to this case. And that's sometimes true. Usually it's true. Sometimes it's not. And this causes lawsuits, that causes the amount of money that the city has to spend to plaintiffs to go up. But there's a bigger argument, and I think this is by far the biggest reason in favor of civilian oversight commissions. And this is because having them will improve public safety. As you probably know, the Gallup poll does a poll every year on confidence in public institutions. 20 years ago, confidence in the police nationwide stood at 64%, meaning 64% of American citizens said they had a great deal of confidence in police or considerable confidence in police. That number has been steadily eroding for the last 20 years, and the last time the poll was conducted last year, 45% of people said they had confidence in police. That's a 30% reduction. When you have more people without confidence in police than having confidence in police, you've got a substantial problem for the police department itself, because the police department cannot do its job of protecting the public unless they have a good working relationship with the public that is willing to provide them with information and assistance to help them do their jobs. I could speak a lot more on the subject specifically, and you don't want to hear it. The key issue is if the police have the assistance of the public, they can do their jobs well and we can all be safer. But if they don't, if people do not have confidence in police and will not talk to them, will not volunteer information, will not even report crimes, we won't.
Okay, thank you, sir. Members, any questions? No question. Thank you, Mr. Spellman.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against House Bill 4842? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Chairman Holland to close.
Thank you, Chairman Lozano. There's nobody more than me that believes that our officers should have a professional code of conduct and standards that they operate. I'm carrying legislation other than this that suggests that and proves that. House Bill 4842 seeks to ensure that officers and firefighters are afforded lawful due process that's free of bias by providing guidelines for these civilian oversight boards. A member of a civilian oversight commission should be carefully vetted. They should pass criminal background checks. They should remain free of personal bias for or against the police or fire departments. The purpose of these commissions are to promote trust and levels of transparency in the public. There are currently members of these types of boards who've been arrested, charged, or prosecuted in the municipalities that they are tasked with serving. This legislation seeks to ensure that local ordinances and outside political influence do not damage the state's efforts to ensure that our officers maintain the high level of professional standards and that officers across jurisdictions are afforded that same level of due process. With that, I close.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Romero?
Yes, sir.
One of the witnesses, I didn't want to ask her, but I'm not sure if she was wrong, mentioned Fort Worth and our Office of the Police Oversight Monitor. We don't have an independent, police monitoring board. There was, lots of fuss over it recently in our city council meetings, lots of disappointment that it didn't happen. But I trust my police chief, Neil Noakes, tremendously. He's a close friend. He's somebody I work closely with. And contrary to what some of my council members believed, I believe and trust Neil Noakes.
Sure.
And I believe and trust in our police oversight monitor. And we have a place to ensure that some sort of communication happens when a situation like this happens. Let's say specifically when Tatiana Jefferson
yes, sir.
Was, murdered in essence in her own home, as well as not necessarily similar to Raja, but very similar. The officer went into the backyard and without ever knocking on the door, and she lost her life in front of her nephew. So, do you believe that this bill would do away with Fort Worth's Office of the Police Oversight Monitor?
No, I believe that it would provide the due process to each alleged person. And could you remind me what happened in that situation?
The officer had a wellness check. The neighbor across the street called because the door was open.
No, what was the result of the investigation in that case?
She passed in 19, and 3 years later, the officer was found guilty of manslaughter. But it took 3 years.
Sure.
So my concern would be if we, and I haven't been able to dive deeply into, I'm just wondering your intent here, is there some basic level of communication?
The intent would be mainly due process, because these boards, commissions are appointed commissions of members of the public. So what we'd like to do is put some guidelines around this process to where we know that the people that are serving on them are qualified to serve on them and aren't in any way biased or politicized, and that all of our officers and or firefighters, I guess in this case we've talked a lot about police officers, have a fair chance in due process, whether they are guilty or not guilty. But if, in essence, a city could appoint a commission stacked with people who hate police officers or that love them.
Right.
And how do you think that's going to work out if you got a commission full of people that don't like police? And whether or not the person was guilty or not guilty, they deserve, just like you or I do, in the court of law or due process.
Agreed. So in our case in Fort Worth, we don't have a citizen oversight board. We have an Office of the Police Oversight Monitor. So we have a police oversight monitor. It's not your intent for cities like Fort Worth that have a police oversight monitor where, because you said they shall not be.
It's not even our intent to not have civilian oversight boards. It's our intent to provide a set of guidelines and guardrails around which they operate, the information that's available to them, and the types of information that they have that could potentially skew an investigation.
And do you believe then that the current citizen oversight boards have investigative powers?
Well, currently, right now, they would have the access to letters, memorandum, documents related to any alleged misconduct that could and should be kept confidential while an investigation's pending, including going through the entire process, appeals to SOA, those types of things. Mm-hmm. You're handing over sealed documents to a civilian oversight panel that could be biased to that officer.
Okay. And could leak and.
That's right.
All right. And so my concern would be if I'm the family of a victim and we don't know until this investigation happens what the communication may look like between the police and again, defending both sides, right?
Yes, sir.
Is there some sort of desire on your part that there be some communication, or is there some level of opportunity that despite there being a police oversight board that there should be some communication with the families?
Yes, and I don't believe that my bill speaks to communication. That would be an internal policy. This bill is a guideline about the process, not communication between families and departments.
And you don't believe that that would have affected us as legislators during the Uvalde investigation in terms of what we would have been able to find out during that case?
I'm not advised on that, Representative Romero. I think that that investigation, and as legislators, we were afforded. Let me speak out of turn, but I think we were afforded additional access because of our rights as legislators.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. With that, the chair withdraws House Bill 4842 and leaves it pending at this time. Chair lays out Senate Bill 736 and recognizes Representative Bettis to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Lozano, Vice Chair Gates, and members of the committee. On behalf of Senator Whitmire, thank you for allowing me to lay out Senate Bill 736 before you today. Since 2003, when voters approved collective bargaining, Houston firefighters had worked under a collective bargaining agreement. Until 2017, the collective bargaining agreement was successfully renegotiated every 3 years by the mayor and the firefighters. Unfortunately, since 2017, the firefighters have worked without a contract because the firefighters and city have been unable to reach an agreement. Senate Bill 736 requires the city and the firefighters union to have mandatory arbitration to mediate any issues that may arise and cannot be resolved between the two parties. This agreement lasts for 1 year. SB 736 amends the local government code by adding that if parties cannot agree, both parties go to arbitration. One arbitrator is chosen by the city, one is chosen by the firefighters, and the third is mutually agreed to. Members, since 2017, Houston has lost more than 400 firefighters, while demand for fire and emergency medical services have doubled. Houston ended 2022 with 3,644 firefighters, which is the lowest in 20 years. My son is a Houston firefighter, so I get to see firsthand how this has affected not only my son, but all of our Houston firefighter families. Houston firefighters put their lives on the line every day and are vital to the safety of the community. The Houston Fire Department is at a breaking point, and it is well past time for the city to come to the table and resolve this 6-year impasse for our dedicated firefighters. And one of the things I want you guys to know is Senator Whitmire filed this bill over a month ago. And when I looked back at the data, he had 0 opposition. He had 1 person, which was Bill Kelly from the city of Houston, that came to testify against his bill. I met with Mr. Kelly and asked and requested that I would let this bill go away if they would, meet with the firefighters. And there's been no good faith effort to do so. I heard from the GHP yesterday, and I thought this bill has been out there. Normally, if you want to resolve a problem or you disagree with the bill, you come and try to work this out, right? I can agree with your bill if we do X, Y, or Z, but I think waiting until the very last minute to try to do this doesn't show any good faith effort at all. So maybe a question we should ask these people that are going to testify against the bill is if they have spoken to Senator Whitmire. And with that, I reserve the right to close.
Thank you. Members, any questions? We'll reserve your right to close. Chair calls Patrick Langton. Thank you for being here, Mr. Langton. We have registered as Patrick Langton with the Houston Professional Firefighters Association and yourself for Senate Bill 736.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee. Thank you for having me. Thank you to Representative Marianne Perez, who has been the champion for Houston firefighters and paramedics, the men and women who I consider to be the bravest, and I have the honor of serving as their president. We would also like to thank the Dean of the Texas Senate, John Whitmire, who has carried this in the Senate. It was one of the first bills to get out because of the nature and the issues that have been going on in the city of Houston as it relates to the 3rd largest municipal fire department in the nation. The city of Houston has failed to do and to follow the law that we are intending in SB 736 resolves the problem. It currently allows for arbitration to be done under Chapter 174, to which the city of Houston sued to overturn that law, and the Texas Supreme Court upheld the law just a month ago. Yet, from 2017 until today, the city of Houston continues to speak out of both sides of their mouth, all while the Houston firefighters and paramedics and the men and women that go out there continue to serve, and we expect them to be 100% right 100% of the time. But when the city does not do what it's obligated to do under the law, we find ourselves here. And if the city would have not tried to oppose and kill Representative Perez's bill last session, then this would already be resolved. Arbitration allows a fair process under the law to ensure that a resolution happens. Firefighters have a right under the law, approved by voters, to have a collective bargaining agreement. And we ask this chair and the committee to please vote in favor for SB 736 and send it to the House floor so we can take care of our brave men and women of the Houston Fire Department. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Romero?
So this has been going on since 2017, and Rep. Perez said that 400 firefighters are no longer. Is that because of retirement, or
no?
Why?
No, Representative. We have never seen a mass exodus before, like we've seen in the history of the Houston Fire Department. They are leaving to go to other jobs. We are one of the busiest departments in the nation, the busiest in the state. And they're leaving to go to other departments that are paying them, that are treating them fairly. And the wages of Houston firefighters are so below what the statute says. Why would anybody want to continue to work or come to the Houston Fire Department when I can go right down the street and make double what I'm making? The city is aware of this problem. They have been aware of this problem. In fact, the firefighters have spent over 24 letters to find a resolution. They continue to obviate their responsibilities. They continue to not do the one thing that they should do, which is to resolve the problem. This arbitration works in other cities, and it can absolutely work here, and this will never be an issue again.
So you're stating then that it's mostly because of pay then? And then one comment, if you can answer both, is you said that this was approved by your voters for arbitration for your...
No, in 2003, collective bargaining, which is Chapter 174, was approved by the voters in Houston by an overwhelming margin.
Okay.
To allow us to fall under that statute and provision.
Okay. Is that something that has to be done by all cities to go to the voters in order for that to happen?
Yes. It is independently municipal area or whatever area you are in. You have to go and get a petition. The voters of that area have to afford you that right to have collective bargaining.
What was the margin of?
Oh, I think it was close to 70%.
Okay. And you said you're the lowest paid in the state. Is that what you?
We are one of the lowest paid in the state, and the comparable cities around the Texas and also the nation, we're absolutely at the bottom. And it's not just the pay. In our contract, we have articles for health and safety, for a number of things that ensure that firefighters are not only healthy, but we can take care of our greatest asset, which is the men and women. So there's far more than just the pay, and this arbitration puts a contract together for 1 year.
And so I didn't know that you had to go to the voters. So you say you had to go to the voters to get binding to get collective bargaining.
Yes.
So this isn't something that's statewide.
No, you have to go individually to your own area to get collective bargaining. You can opt in or opt out depending on what each city or what their voters wanted. Under the statute as it sits now, arbitration is allowed. It's just permissive. And in the absence of the city agreeing to go to arbitration, which we asked for in 2017, the remedy under the law is to go to judicial enforcement if the city refuses to go to arbitration. But we started that process in 2017, and they sued to overturn the law.
I see. Okay. So it's not something that, as an example, other departments around the city have if it's permissive, because it's up to the city to decide. So there's no real push to force them to do it.
Correct. There has to be, and what the Supreme Court and what we've said all along is firefighters in Texas cannot strike under the law. We don't need firefighters to strike. In order to have no strike provision, you have to have a resolution because firefighters under law are owed a contract as a right that was given by the voters under state statute, and that has not happened.
So since 2017, if you've not been able to negotiate, has your firefighters gotten any raises since then?
We worked with the federal government. We got ARPA funds during COVID to allocate them to the men and women on the front lines, to which the city has provided ARPA funds to our firefighters in the last 2 years for 6%. But as far as a contract and under the statute and the wage, they have not.
So had it not been for ARPA funds, you wouldn't have gotten any raises?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair calls Taylor Landon. Thank you for being here, Taylor. We show you registered as Taylor Landon for the Greater Houston Partnership against Senate Bill 736.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the opportunity to address the committee today. As you said, my name is Taylor Landine. I'm representing the Greater Houston Partnership and speaking in opposition to Senate Bill 736. So the Greater Houston Partnership is a regional chamber of commerce organization for the Houston region, representing roughly 900 companies and organizations in the Houston region. And we put an emphasis on issues that we think could have an adverse impact to the city of Houston's financial position. This bill does have the potential, in our view, to negatively impact the city's budget over the long term. And as we look ahead several years, especially with the exhaustion of the federal funding that Mr. Langton just referred to, we think that the city will face some hard choices in order to balance their budget. And we think having contract disputes settled by an arbitrator without guardrail language, as is put forward in this bill, is something that could make that looming problem somewhat worse. And while we don't take issue at all with the concept of arbitration for the city's fire department, we do have concerns that, as I said, the bill lacks any articulated guidance to ensure that the arbitrators are taking into consideration the fiscal constraints and the unique situation on the ground in Houston. And similar provisions, as you all are probably aware, exist to provide that guardrail language in San Antonio and Austin, and we think that's an important element of any bill going forward. And our desire is that all municipal employees operate under fairly negotiated contracts, which result in predictability, and that predictability is really important when city leaders are trying to make decisions about how to balance the budget and how to provide adequate city services to all Houstonians. And one of the reasons why we're particularly interested in this piece of legislation is that we at the partnership are the principal economic development organization for the region, and we talk with prospects that want to locate their business or expand their business in Houston every single day, and those prospects invariably ask about the financial condition of the city. So the city's budget and overall financial health impacts our ability to attract and win those projects and keep the momentum that we have going in Houston strong. So I'll close by saying that I very much respect Representative Perez's comments earlier and want to acknowledge that we have been working with stakeholders throughout this process. And then when the bill came out of the Senate from Senator Whitmire, that is when we began engaging in the House so over the last few weeks or few days, whatever the timeline has been, since it's come over from the Senate, we have been engaged. So I'll leave it there and happy to try to answer any questions.
Great. Members, any questions? Representative Romero?
So thank you. Just a couple of real quick questions. I mean, and I will follow up, and I think you answered the question. So you have not been able to, you've not talked to Senator Whitmire?
We have had discussions with Senator
Is this
Whitmire.
after the bill had already passed out of?
Yes, sir.
So you didn't talk to him beforehand?
Correct.
Okay. So you said earlier that, you're concerned with the financial position long term. How long do you expect firefighters to continue to put this load on their backs then if they have been without any sort of contracting since 2017? Is this something that the poor decision making by your city should be paid for by city employees?
I think the answer to that question is better left to the two organizations that
I'm asking you.
Well, I do think that we want fire, police, municipal employees to operate under fairly negotiated contracts. And we have an expectation that all parties come to the table and figure that out. There's obviously rough parameters that govern that process.
And when businesses come to locate in Houston, are they offered incentives to come to Houston that firefighters may feel is also on their backs?
When you say incentives?
Tax deductions, abatements.
Sure.
Through your, and do you ever feel like those abatements or those offers by whether it be your Chamber of Commerce or the City of Houston's decisions are also impacting the financial viability, health, and budget of Houston?
So you're saying,
does it have a financial impact when you give an incentive of a tax abatement to a business that locates that may in one way, shape, or form be also on the backs of your firefighters?
I don't think that the incentives that are offered in whether it's city, county, state incentives, sure there's invariable interaction between whether it's incentives and then the available budget of different cities and counties. But is it a one-for-one relationship? I don't think so.
But it has an impact.
I think that's fair to say.
So it would be also fair to say then that if you've continually made those kinds of decisions, therefore there isn't enough room, enough dollars in the pie to share with your firefighters?
We would love to see Houston firefighters be paid as much as they possibly can, and I think that if we move forward with and continue in the process that we have laid out by statute, we think that we can get to the right spot. We're not opposed to the arbitration in this case, and we think that it can actually be a useful tool. We just would like to see similar language to the guardrail language that's in place in Fort Worth in San Antonio and Austin that has been effective in those municipalities.
So if you were concerned with the language that should have been in there, why didn't you have that discussion with Senator Whitmire?
I think at that point there was not a companion piece of legislation on the House side, and when it came over to the House, that's when we decided to engage. Thank you.
Members, any more questions? No questions. Thank you, sir. Let me go with Dave. Chair calls Dave Martin. Thank you for being here, Mr. Martin. We show you registered as Dave Martin, council member with the City of Houston, against Senate Bill 736.
That's correct. And thank you, Chairman Lozano, and thank you, members of the committee. My name is Dave Martin. I serve as City Council member from District E. One of my constituents is sitting right to my right, State Representative Marianne Perez. I also serve as Mayor Pro Tem for the city, but more importantly, I serve as Chair of the Budget and Fiscal Affairs Committee and also Chair of the Debt Financing Committee for the City of Houston. On a professional basis, I am now retired, but I spent many years working for two Big Four accounting firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers and Ernst & Young, and I retired as a managing director of Marsh & McLennan, which is a global Fortune 1000 company. I'm here today to speak against Senate Bill 736. But let me go on record. I am not against binding arbitration. Again, I am not against binding arbitration. And I know that our local fire department and our local fire union is looking to collect signatures to put binding arbitration on the ballot for this November. And I will sign that form. But more importantly, working with City Council, we could put considerations for the arbiters that address the City of Houston's finances, as well as the timeline that works for our budget project. The reason why I bring this up is right now we're working on our present budget workshops to prepare for the city's fiscal year 24 budget, which takes effect on July 1 of this year. In working with Chief Sam Pena, who you'll hear from next, we are working to fund close to $600 million next year for the Houston Fire Department budget, which includes a 6% raise for our firefighters. So that is 3 consecutive years, even though collective bargaining couldn't get us to where we need to be, that we have presented 6% raises for fire departments. Fiscal year 22, we did a 6%. Fiscal year 23, we did a 6%. And this year in fiscal year 24, our budget is prepared to include a 6% increase. I am concerned that the investment considered in Senate Bill 736 that would create a 60-day countdown for binding arbitration. This timeline of the bill mandates that makes it impossible for us as we go through the budget process to build the budget. And budget integrity has always been the cornerstone of what we do. If you look at what you helped us with as a body in 2017, we have reduced the pension liability. At that time, it was $8.2 billion. Presently is at $2.2 billion. Again, pension liability from 8.2 to 2.2 billion. Our OPEB liability, which is our other post-employment benefits, decreased from 9.1 billion to 4.5 billion. So the budget that we do goes in the proper format. The problem that we have with this are the conditions that laid out in Senator Whitmire's bill. And every time I meet with Senator Whitmire and Representative Charles Cunningham, who I served on the school board for 10 years with, can tell you, John runs away from me now because every time I approach him on two subjects that are near and dear to us, and that is this bill that was part of his designation in the Senate, and also another bill that we're working on. But the financial conditions that the city must abide by within this bill makes it literally impossible for us to prepare a proper budget.
Okay. Representative Romero?
Mr. Dean, how long have you been a city council member?
10 and a half years.
10 and a half years?
Yes, sir.
And when you became a city council member 10 and a half years, do you believe that the financial position of Houston was in as good a shape as private businesses that you work for?
No, it was in horrible shape. It was in horrible shape up until this body helped us with the pension liability.
Insurance just finished. So it was in horrible shape then, and it's not in good shape now.
No, it's in tremendous shape now.
It is in tremendous shape now?
Yes. You look at the pension liability that we have on the pension side. The two biggest factors that affect the city are pension liabilities. Same thing in the state of Texas, money that you owe to retirees and situations like that. Yeah. Until we work with the state legislator in 17, our pension liability was over $8 billion. Today it's $2 billion. That's in a 5-year period of time that we've got that down. And the same thing with post-employment benefits from 9.1 to 4.5. So we're in good shape. You know, the problem we have is a collective bargaining is a state law, not binding arbitration. I'm in favor of binding arbitration. I see no problem with that. But we're restricted by the Senate bill in that it comes now and we're working on our budget. Now, if you wanted to look at something that affects us that doesn't affect us this year, maybe that's a different consideration. But until you change the language, we have to be opposed to it because it constrains us in what we're trying to do.
And being opposed to it, you said Senator Whitmire runs from you.
Yes, he does.
Okay, but I just asked the previous gentleman if he spoke with him. Did you speak with him?
Yes, several times.
About this bill?
Yes, this bill and another bill.
In his office, or when did you speak with him?
I saw him at a police function. When was that function? Probably 3 weeks ago.
Okay, and you?
Yeah. John Whitmire is a dear friend of mine. So he may be the next mayor in the city of Houston. So he'll be dealing with collective bargaining.
You mentioned in your letter here, both Austin and San Antonio included provisions about revenues available.
Right.
So when you say revenues available, if you define it however you push on your calculator, that revenues are not available, then therefore they should wait how many years for a new contract? Just very specifically.
Today.
How long, very specifically, Mr. Martin, how long should Houston firefighters have to wait to sit down at the table and actually renegotiate a contract?
Less than 24 hours. But collective bargaining, sir, is
okay, so
two
hold on.
groups.
So you just said
if the two groups don't get together, you can't have a collective bargaining process.
So they've been waiting 6 years, and you just said 24 hours.
They've been waiting 6 years, and even though that we didn't have to do this, we gave them 6% for the last 3 years, sir.
Was that ARPA funds, or were those from your budget?
Those were a combination of ARPA fund, COVID funds, and general revenue funds. The federal government allowed us to do that. They allowed us to pay.
What percentage of your general revenue funds that you gave in raises or changes to their contract were not ARPA funds? I'm
not sure of the exact number, but we work as a city. We're a service business. 85% of our general fund goes to people. We don't make widgets or anything like that. We have people that we pay. 85% of our general fund dollars goes to mainly police, fire, and municipal employees.
Mr. Martin, and you mentioned that the timing of the bill, if it went into effect, it would disrupt the budget proceedings for the upcoming.
Correct.
So if it was to take effect at a later date,
I have no, as I mentioned up front, I have no problem with binding arbitration. Okay. But the conditions that are imposed in this particular bill, sir, does not include financial conditions that the city or the arbiters must look at. Like San Antonio, like Austin, that included, as Representative Romero stated, revenues available. State law for Houston, firefighters earn overtime at 46.7 hours. After that, the standard is 53 hours. Also, the timeline is a 60-day countdown. We don't have a 60-day countdown that runs parallel with our budget process. We're having workshops this week and next week to prepare to make sure that we present a sound budget, and that disrupts it eventually. If this bill does get signed, it's after that format. And then we have to go back and do we redo everything? I'm not sure. But I think we've been fair in offering 6% for the last 3 years. We didn't have to do that. That was the right thing to do because Marty Langdon is correct. They should be paid more. And unfortunately, the collective bargaining process in the city of Houston has not worked.
Okay. Members, any more questions? Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, sir. God bless.
Yes, sir. Chair calls Arturo Michael. Yes, sir. Michael, we show you registered as Arturo Michael.
I pronounce my last name Michelle, but that's correct. Arturo Michelle. I am the city attorney for the city of Houston, and I'm testifying here in opposition to Senate Bill 736.
Yes, sir.
The purpose is laudable, to try to get a collective bargaining agreement. That is what the city needs. That's what the firefighter needs. My concern is that mandatory arbitration will have the opposite effect. I believe it will incentivize contentiousness, litigiousness, and I think the past litigation between the city and the firefighters has caused the problem in the failure to be at the bargaining table. I have great respect for Mr. Langdon. I consider him a friend. Same for Representative Perez. I have campaigned for her. She is a friend of mine. This is my second tenure as city attorney. I served from 2004 until 2010 under Mayors White and Parker. And we worked out collective bargaining agreements. I returned at the beginning of 2021 in the midst of 3 major pieces of litigation that for the most part have now concluded. There's the opportunity for rehearing before the Texas Supreme Court still exists, but that is a very rare event that it would substantially change what the opinions are. And there were 3 lawsuits. One was the Prop B, where the firefighters sought by charter amendment to be paid the same as police officers, despite the distinctions in the duties, positions, et cetera. The Supreme Court recently held that that was preempted by state law. There was also a firefighter challenge to the 2017 pension reforms by the legislature. That was recently upheld, those reforms. And then there's the judicial enforcement provision that the city challenged, in which the firefighters prevail. So it has been a bit of a one loss for both. And that was not spurious litigation. In the decades-long history of collective bargaining, Chapter 174, there were only 2 appellate decisions on the issue raised in that case, and each appellate court came to a different decision. This was the issue as to whether the legislature had given sufficient parameters to the court to be able to make a determination, or whether it was an impermissible legislative delegation. Now that those are essentially concluded, I think the parties can return to the table. You know, one of the issues that the city faced in this is that as long as Prop B existed, you would be negotiating with the very real consideration that could all be eliminated if Prop B were to have been upheld. I think now that the litigation is gone, we are in a position really to sit down and reach a multi-year agreement. And arbitration and judicial enforcement do have the limitation of 1 year, and then you'd have to repeat the entire process. This, of course, recognizes that municipalities have to pass annual balanced budgets, and so the legislature recognizes that. But we expend significant resources in arbitration. Both sides do. You pay the arbitration board, you pay your attorneys, you pay your experts, and then that continues. I'd like to conclude with the points that arbitration has less discovery, relaxed rules, and weak subpoena power. They're not well suited for a complex area such as firefighter compensation. And in particular, because the comparator is the private sector, you have to compel that information. For example, if there's a fire suppression unit in Amarillo for a private company, they are free to give us partial information or give one side more information than the other or not give one side. That does not yield itself to a process where you can bargain in good faith. I do believe that the best way is to work under the statute as it is and return to the bargaining table. The city is willing to do that.
Thank you. Representative Romero?
Mr. Michel, just real quickly, you close in your letter repeating the same point that the firefighters have gotten an 18% firefighter raise over the last 3 years. And I'm just reading from your own documents that you both have just given me here. So pardon me for my questions, but I'm going to ask. It's troubling to me that the previous witness says that the guardrails that he's looking for is when funds are available. For 6 years, you haven't renegotiated a contract, but you mentioned here that there's 18% firefighter raise over the last 3 years. And I asked him how much of that money was from ARPA funds. And even though he's in charge of budget and fiscal affairs, he couldn't answer the question. So I ask you, how much of that 18% came from general revenue, which would give faith to me and potentially other members here of this committee that you even have funds available or would make funds available in negotiation. Otherwise, why would someone give you that guardrail if there's no reason to have faith that funds will even be available when these funds run out? So when the funds run out, ARPA funds, where's the money going to come from without making those tough decisions?
Well, to answer your specific question, I cannot answer this as I stand here, but I can get with my finance department and find out and provide that information to the committee. And it may be that there are intermingled funds, so that may have to be determined. But the city of Houston has always spent nearly 60% of its budget dedicated to public safety. It has done that for the last 20-some years that I've been involved, and I think we'll continue to do that. I think with pension reform, the firefighters are seeking greater take-home compensation, and the city is committed to this. We spend a great deal of our funds for public safety, and will continue to do so.
And so then would that be a true statement or a false statement that Houston firefighters rank, at lowest or near the bottom when it comes to their pay?
I'm not sure, but again, I can find that out. I do believe that the history with the Houston firefighters has been that they sought greater pension benefits than compensation benefits, and if pension is no longer growing the way they had anticipated, they would seek higher compensation benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Michel.
Members, any more questions? No questions.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Okay, members, we have one more witness registered. Chair calls Sam Pena. Mr. Pena, we show you registered as Sam Pena, Fire Chief of the Houston Fire Department, neutral on Senate Bill 736.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Sam Pena. I'm the Fire Chief for the City of Houston. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak on Senate Bill 736. This bill is carefully crafted to apply only to the City of Houston, and if implemented as drafted, it'll take effect, as has been mentioned, in the middle of the city's fiscal year. That would force a reorder of fiscal priorities to accommodate for any possible award that is given. Most importantly, the bill brings the state into local negotiations as it applies only to firefighters. However, it doesn't place any parameters or boundaries on what the arbitrators must consider in determining their awards. Essentially, this binding arbitration takes the control away from firefighters and the city without any assurances that the fiscal or operational conditions are going to be taken into effect by the arbitrators in any rational manner. The reason that's important is that over the last 6 years, the city of Houston has faced 6 natural disasters, a number of critical incidents that affect this aging infrastructure. And in each time, the city's firefighters and the city have stepped up to address those challenges, but it has taken significant financial reserves to address those issues. In those same 6 years, the city of Houston has invested nearly $150 million into firefighting equipment, health and safety initiatives for firefighters, and the implementation of an 18% pay raise for all firefighters across the board. One critical aspect that has been outstanding is the collective bargaining agreement. And I thank Representative Perez and the Senator for bringing this item as a way to try to address these issues. There is no question that the firefighters deserve a contract. It's in the public's best interest to have a workforce that is efficient and that is properly compensated. But the collective bargaining process is the right way to ensure that there is a balance between addressing the firefighters' continuous increase in cost of living and addressing the cost of doing operations that the city must also fund. The only way to do that is to come to an agreement at the table. And both sides have to be reasonable in their expectations and have a commitment to bargain in good faith. Now, we have been mired in legal proceedings since 2017. And recently, those cases have been concluded. The legal proceedings have been primarily overpay. Now, ostensibly, Senate Bill 736 is designed to address that impasse. However, it doesn't provide any parameters that the arbitrators must consider in giving their awards. Other local governments, such as San Antonio and Austin, whose voters have locally approved binding arbitration for their firefighters, do place a list of standards and parameters that arbitrators must consider. So including parameters in the legislation would seem desirable for a couple of reasons, and I'll finish up here quickly. First, the legislature, in delegating the authority to arbitrators to set the cost of government, in essence, should provide some explicit and some reasonable standards to be used by arbitrators in their determination. Second, because the city will fund any award given by an outside group that's not beholden to the taxpayer, doesn't have any expertise in Houston budgeting, doesn't have any expertise in firefighting operations. Establishing some parameters at least gives some assurance to the firefighters and the city that the arbitrators have considered the financial and the operational conditions by the arbitrators. So it's important to note, that, as has been mentioned also, that that firefighters have collected signatures to have binding arbitration on the ballot this November. And so I asked the committee that to consider the implications that this bill would have on the city's operations, and if it is so inclined to move this bill forward, to at least place some parameters and criteria into the bill that the arbitrators must consider in giving their awards.
Okay, members, any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against Senate Bill 736? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Representative Bettis to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, I have to respectfully disagree with the persons that have testified against this bill. It is obviously no secret that Senator Whitmire is running to be the next mayor of the city of Houston. If the statements that were made and this bill were going to be so detrimental to the city, why would Senator Whitmire file the bill and try his best to get this bill passed? When this came out of the Senate, it came out 100% for the bill in committee and also 100% for the bill through the Senate. So this bill is passing with no opposition. My last statement is 6 years. Our first responders have waited 6 years, and the city of Houston has had those 6 years in which to come to the table. The last, I want to say the last rulings of the litigation were over a month ago, and still no date. No one has come to try to get to the table. And with that, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like to, vote this out today, that would be great, and I would be fine with it. But thank you for your time and consideration. I greatly appreciate your favorable consideration.
Thank you, Representative. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you. With that, the chair will withdraw Senate Bill 736 and leave it pending at this time. Okay, members, we have one more bill. Good. Through it very quickly. Chair lays out Senate Bill 767. And, okay, do I have a sub? Okay. Members, I'm going to lay this bill out myself. Senate Bill 767, members, to Senator Parker's bill, which aims to provide transparency to the public for municipal fees. The bill requires a schedule of new or increased fees on a city's budget cover page. It requires a separate council vote to approve of a new or increased fee. It allows cities to provide the URL link to the budget in the public notice, and it requires that cities over 20,000 people maintain an email notification service for new or increased fees. Members, I believe we do have some witnesses here to testify. Chair calls Crystal Moya. Thank you for being here, Ms. Moya. We have you registered as Crystal Moya on behalf of the Texas Apartment Association for Senate Bill 767.
Yes, sir. Good morning. My name is Crystal Moya. I'm here today representing the Texas Apartment Association in support of Senate Bill 767. Thank you, Chairman Lozano, for your leadership on this bill. City fees and taxes hurt housing affordability, both by increasing the cost of developing new properties and increasing the cost to operate existing communities. Yes, many city fees fund the services necessary to provide quality of life. However, we are concerned about the process in adopting these fees, the transparency in the budgeting process, as well as ensuring there is an opportunity for stakeholders to provide their input. We have seen many examples of how these new fees being adopted with little or no notice. Sometimes even the city council members who voted on these fee increases weren't even aware. I can go through a list of examples, but I know that we're short on time, so I want to be respectful of your time, Chairman. And even when the market allows, rental property owners can pass along some of these fees to our tenants or renters. But typically these fees can't necessarily be passed along in the middle of our lease terms. And the situation is made even more difficult when you're providing affordable housing, such as I'm in that business, particularly for those properties that are rent restricted. And of course, this goes against our long-term goal of continuing to provide affordable housing. Essentially, at the end of the day, Senate Bill 767 will help make the fee adoption process more transparent without placing undue burdens on cities. Thank you for your consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Moya. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we have one more witness registered to testify. Chair calls Caroline Welton. Thank you for being here, Ms. Welton. We have you registered as Caroline Welton with the Texas Public Policy Foundation for Senate Bill 767.
That is correct. Thank you for having me today. My name is Caroline Welton, and I represent the Texas Public Policy Foundation. I will be testifying in support of Senate Bill 767. At the heart of this legislation is the principle that public information should be timely, accurate, accessible, and clearly communicated, because this is the recipe for good government. In furtherance of these goals, Senate Bill 767 requires municipalities to disclose new and increased fees in a manner similar to what is already required for property taxes, and in a style that bears some similarity also to what is already being done in certain cities. For example, in 2015, the city of Austin created a taxpayer impact statement to demonstrate what the major tax and fee changes would mean for the average Austin area resident. It includes easily digestible information on the annual increase or decrease in common municipal charges for the typical homeowner. Any interested party can readily find this information at the front cover of every proposed and adopted budget. The city of Austin deserves credit for taking the initiative to present this information to the public. With it, Austinites are better informed and better able to hold their local elected officials accountable. While the concept, of course, proposed in Senate Bill 767 is different and has different requirements, the objectives and the outcomes are quite similar. People should know what the cost of their government is, and they don't need an advanced degree to do that. James Madison said that knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. Because of this, I hope that this committee will look favorably upon Senate Bill 767 and help people arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Members, any more questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Okay, members, is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against Senate Bill 767? Hearing none, the chair will now close on Senate Bill 767 unless there are any questions. The questions, okay, members, I close. With that, the chair will withdraw Senate Bill 767 and leave it pending at this time. Let the record reflect that Representative Cortez is present. If there is no further business, the House Committee on Urban Affairs stands adjourned subject to call of the chair.